So this is going to be a huge video for the channel, not only because this is going to be the very first video on the channel where I've really covered a PlayStation 4 game in depth. Most of my content is geared towards retro games and the Nintendo Switch, but I just had to talk about this game. And also, this is probably going to be the most disliked video on my channel with the most hate comments, just because of how insanely controversial The Last of Us Part 2 is. So, without further ado, let's get into my 100% honest thoughts and opinions on The Last of Us Part 2. A little disclaimer to start things off with. I'm going to try to keep this video as spoiler free as possible, but there will be some gameplay spoilers all throughout the video. Also, the footage shown throughout this video will only be from the first 12 hours of my total 27-hour playtime to avoid major spoilers. And look, I am not a critic and I am not a game reviewer. I am simply giving my honest thoughts on the game from my own personal experience and perspective, and of course you do not have to agree with me, and that is okay. When I play games, I am not a hypercritical person and I do not nitpick every single little detail, because for me, I play games to have fun and have an experience, and being overly critical and nitpicky sucks the fun out of it for me. So let's kick things off with my spoiler-free thoughts on the single most controversial thing about The Last of Us Part 2, and that is the story. Now, at the very end of the video, after the outro, I'm actually going to go into some mega spoiler talk about the story, but you will have plenty of warning to make sure that you don't see those spoilers if you don't want to. For now, I'm going to be super vague about the story so as to not spoil anything. The first game was an epic and emotional tale showcasing both the best in humanity and the worst in humanity at the same time. Joel and Ellie's journey was brutal and full of touching character moments that led you to really love these characters. The ending was super emotional and very well written, and really left me feeling speechless. Now, even though the story in The Last of Us Part 2 is not quite as good as Part 1, in my opinion, the story is still absolutely fantastic. It had a lot of deep themes to it that centered around revenge and the consequences of revenge, as well as the consequences of our actions in general. It is no secret that in The Last of Us Part 2 you play as Ellie on a journey, but I cannot say what the journey is or the reason why, because it would be a huge spoiler. Just like Part 1, it was a brutal and emotional journey that really showcased the worst in humanity, and it was full of fantastic dialogue, touching character moments, and brilliant flashback sequences. Ellie's journey is brutal and violent and full of rage and just downright hard to watch at times, but in my opinion, it is an emotionally satisfying journey. I love all the dialogue between the characters as you navigate the world. Some of it just happens organically and some is optional, but it all adds to the character development and makes the game more immersive and the journey far more meaningful. As you explore, you will find documents that add further to the world and story building, and it is a great way to learn more about the two factions in the game, as well as learning smaller sub-stories about various people surviving in this harsh and brutal world, and some of it is just downright sad. Overall, I personally thought the story was brilliant and almost as good as the story in Part 1, but not quite there. Now, I sort of understand some of the problems people have with the story, but I just don't feel the same or agree with what many people are complaining about. But again, I am no critic and I don't want to be, and I respect everyone's opinion on the story. That is all I'm going to say about the story for now, but again, at the very end of the video, after some in-your-face spoiler warnings, I will go into much more detail on my thoughts of the story, so if you have played and beat the game, or if you just don't care about spoilers, be sure and check that out at the end of the video. Now, one thing that I don't think anybody can disagree on is that this game has some of the best graphics of the generation. I mean, we are getting close to photorealism here, which of course makes the game more immersive and the brutality feel more real. And holy hell, this game is brutal, and certainly not for those that are squeamish with violence. The character models look incredibly lifelike, and the way that they interact with the environment and other character models feels so natural and organic that I swear sometimes I forgot I was playing a game. The environments are so gorgeous and densely packed full of details that it makes you want to look at every nook and cranny. Naughty Dog has absolutely nailed the look and feel of a post-apocalyptic game here. Outdoor environments are overgrown with tons of foliage and erosion is eating away at everything. Buildings are dilapidated and eroded both inside and outside. Indoor environments are full of so many details that each area seems to tell its own story. You will see dust covering everything, and you will find many things such as books, CDs, games, and records, most of which have their own unique art and titles. You will find food tucked away in cabinet and around kitchens, art and posters, and all sorts of things covering the walls. The list goes on and on. Now, from what I could see, there were very few reused assets, and that made the world even more believable and interesting. There's a huge variety of environments as well, everything from skyscrapers to hospitals, sewers, villages on an island, stores, restaurants, subdivisions, mansions, just tons of variety to keep things fresh. Layer on top of that incredibly immersive and realistic sound design that pulls you into the world even more, and you will really start to forget you are playing a game. I played the entire game with good headphones on, and it has 3D audio, which I love, and the music in the game is perfect and fits and is never in your face. Overall, I am super impressed with the graphics, music, and sound. The presentation in The Last of Us Part 2 is absolutely stunning and not something we see often in a video game, at least to this degree of realism. Now let's get to my second favorite thing in The Last of Us Part 2 next to the story, which is of course the awesome gameplay. The gameplay is another thing that some people don't agree on and tend to criticize, although not near as much as the story. But I personally had an incredible experience, and it never got boring or repetitive and was always intense and captivating. The gameplay in The Last of Us Part 2 alternates between story and exploration sections, which sometimes have small combat skirmishes in them, and large or open, sometimes cramped combat sections where you are desperately trying to survive and take out all of the enemies. The level of versatility and variety in the combat in both your arsenal, moveset, and the environment and enemies is incredible and really makes each battle feel unique, while also giving you dozens of options on how you can approach and conquer each scenario. In each combat section, you are either fighting humans or the infected, and sometimes you are fighting both at once. The two main enemy factions feel totally different from each other, and your strategy with each one may change depending on the scenario. The WLF are military trained and use heavy weaponry and superior communication and teamwork to locate and kill you, as well as dogs to sniff out your trail and alert them to your position. The Seraphites, aka the Scars, are a religious cult-like group, and they tend to use bows and move stealthily and communicate using a series of whistles that will make no sense to you as the player, which makes it difficult to know what they are planning or how they will approach you. Then of course you have the infected, which are sometimes downright terrifying. You have runners, which will literally sprint after you when they see you, so they are fast and aggressive but fairly easy to kill, but they can be deadly in groups. You have stalkers, which are so stealthy that you cannot hear them using your listen mode ability, and they will hide and sneak up on you, but they are also fairly easy to kill. You have clickers, which are blind, but they constantly make an unnerving clicking sound to try to detect you via sound and movement. So you have to be incredibly quiet around them, because if they grab you, it is an instant death. They are moderately difficult to kill. Then you have bloaters, which are very large and armored and hard to take down, and they do massive damage and also throw spore bombs at you. There's a new infected type in this game called a shambler, which are also large and armored, but not as hard to take down as a bloater, and they will emit acidic spores from their body if they get close to you, as well as when they die. There's also a boss infected type, which I will not spoil, but it is super intense and deadly. Now, I've heard some people say that they have had mixed results with the enemy AI, and some people say they have had a great experience with the AI. I am one of the people that had a great experience. I found the AI to be incredibly intelligent and adaptive to what I was doing in the game. They would frequently flank me from different directions, flush me out of hiding in different ways, and work together as a team to try and kill me. But I also noticed when you get down to the last few people, they seem to be scared and act erratically, which I thought was a pretty cool touch. The infected are of course not very smart, and they just react very violently to everything, so you can use that to your advantage. Then you have the environments themselves, which encourage experimentation in how you approach combat. Outdoor environments are large and sprawling, and oftentimes quite vertical as well. They provide plenty of cover and hiding spots, and there are multiple branching paths for silent maneuvering throughout the area, or if you want to go all Rambo, you have that option as well, and there are plenty of ways to quickly get around the environment and go to all-out war. Indoor combat areas, which are mainly where you fight infected, tend to be dark and a bit more cramped, making it harder for you to hide and avoid enemies, but even still, there are plenty of ways to get around and use the cramped spaces and corridors to your advantage. And of course, Ellie's arsenal and moveset is far more refined in Part 2 than Joel's was in Part 1. Ellie's arsenal has expanded, and you of course have your pistol, shotgun, revolver, rifle, and bow, some of which even have alternate ammo types, but you also have your melee weapons and your throwables such as Molotov cocktails and stun bombs, and you can still pick up bottles and bricks and throw those as well. There's also a very awesome gun that you get towards the end of the game, but I do not want to spoil that. One of my favorite tools was the trap mine, which is a craftable trap that you can place on the ground, and when enemies walk over it, they will explode. You can place these in doorways and lure enemies to you into the trap, and it is very satisfying. Ellie's moveset has also expanded in some very cool ways over Joel's in the previous game. For example, not only can you still crouch, which makes sneaking easier and improves aim, but you can also now go prone on the ground, which improves aim even more and allows you to sneak through tall grass and under trucks and things like that. Also, this time around, when you access your crafting menu, the game does not pause, so you have to be very careful during combat to make sure you have time to craft before an enemy rolls up on you. My favorite new addition is the dodge mechanic by pressing L1. This literally changes everything because now if you are faced with one or more enemies trying to kill you with melee, you can dodge and counter attack, and damn, this feels so good and makes melee combat an absolute blast. Even if you have two enemies on you at once, you can dodge and counter until you have killed them both, and the animations are so fluid and also change depending what is around you, and it is incredibly impressive, and I'm not really sure how Naughty Dog pulled this off. I also really love the progression in Part 2. You start out with only a few weapons and tools, and it is hard to aim at first, and you have very little resources. But as you progress, you will find new weapons, new tools, scrap for upgrading your guns at workbenches, books for learning new skill trees, and pills for upgrading those skill trees. As you upgrade your weapons and skill trees, you will become more and more badass, and aiming with your guns will become a bit easier, making you more proficient with ammo. Some people think that the gunplay is janky, but I feel that they tried to make it a bit more realistic in that in stressful situations, it will be harder to aim, but once you get some upgrades and get better at the game, it gets easier. But finding all the guns, tools, pills, scraps, and even some collectibles really encourages exploration all throughout the game so that you can build your character up enough to handle the tougher late game battles. Also worth mentioning is that the controls feel great in my opinion, so much so that I didn't even have to think about it after a while, and I forgot I was even holding a controller, and I love that. I honestly have no complaints about the game at all, and I know some people might find that hard to believe, but it is the honest truth that I cannot think of a single thing about The Last of Us Part 2 that I do not like. For me, it is a masterpiece of a game, and again, you do not have to agree with me, and that is fine because this is all just my opinion and my perspective. The story and presentation combined with all of these gameplay elements and mechanics come together beautifully to create one of the best gaming experiences that I have had in quite some time, and one that I will not forget anytime soon. So there you have it, folks. Those are my honest thoughts and opinions on The Last of Us Part 2 on the PlayStation 4. But I want to hear about what you think about the game if you've actually played it. So let me know that in the comments down below, what your impression of the game is. Even if you haven't beat it, feel free to let me know what your impression is of what you've played so far. Also, let me know in the comments down below if you have not played it and you plan on picking it up. Hopefully my video helped your decision in some way. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you're a hater and you disagree with everything I'm saying, feel free to hit the dislike, because guess what? That still helps the video, so that's fine. If you're new to the channel and you like what you saw today, consider subscribing so that you can join the RetroWolf family. And if you've played and beat the game, or if you don't care about spoilers, stay tuned after this outro so that you can hear my very spoiler-filled thoughts about the story. Otherwise, stay safe out there, keep playing games and having a good time, and I will see you all in the next video. Later. Okay, so if you're here right now, I'm going to assume that you've played and beat both the first game and Part 2, or you just don't care about seeing spoilers and you've already spoiled it for yourself anyways and you just want to know my thoughts. Either way, we're going to get into it, and I'm just going to throw some random gameplay over the screen while I talk. It's not going to be anything that matches what I'm talking about, so let's get started. So at the end of The Last of Us Part 1, Joel ended up killing a ton of Fireflies, including many civilians, in order to stop the operation on Ellie to get a cure because it would have killed her in the process. Now let me say this, I love Joel as a character, and he is one of my favorite characters in the series, but let's be real here. What Joel did was bad, and it was selfish because that cure could have saved humanity, and also he killed a bunch of people in the process who were not bad people in order to save one person. Now of course we know why Joel did it. It was because he loved Ellie and he could not let her go. But that doesn't change the fact that what he did was bad all around. This leads me to what I see as the two main themes of Part 2. Your actions have consequences, which are sometimes severe, and also revenge can cause more damage and make things worse and ultimately not amount to anything. Joel's actions in the first game had bad consequences. Those consequences led to his relationship with Ellie being almost shattered when she discovered the truth, and it ultimately led to his brutal death at the hands of Abby because the doctor Joel brutally killed to save Ellie was Abby's father, who she loved more than anyone. So then we have Abby, and as I played through Abby's story and learned about why she set out on a path of revenge to kill Joel, I began to realize that Abby's not a bad person, and in many ways she is similar to both Joel and Ellie. However, in pursuing and exacting that revenge, there were terrible consequences for Abby because Ellie then set out on her path of revenge against Abby for killing Joel, and this resulted in not only all of Abby's friends dying brutally between Ellie and Tommy, but also Abby becoming an enemy to her own group, the WLF, and in the end, the only person in her life left is Lev, the young boy she saved from the Seraphites. I believe Abby started to feel somewhat guilty about killing Joel and how she did it, which is partially why she helped the two Seraphite kids so that she could try to balance the scales in some way, but this too went poorly as Lev's sister was killed and Abby and Lev were captured towards the end of the game and made to be slaves by another faction for a few months. Abby ended up sparing Ellie in their first confrontation because I think she started to realize that all this senseless violence never has a good outcome, and she just wanted to be done with it and move on. Ellie's path of revenge against Abby also had terrible consequences in that Jesse died, Dina and Tommy almost died, Ellie almost died several times, Ellie killed a pregnant lady, and in the end, Ellie burned her relationship with both Tommy and Dina and lost 2 fingers and could no longer play the guitar. Damn. At the very end, when Ellie went after Abby one more time in California, I don't think she really wanted to kill Abby. I think she wanted some kind of resolution, but was also tired of all the senseless violence and the consequences it brought. When Ellie finally found Abby and Lev tied to those poles and left for dead, I think she saw some of Joel in Abby, in that Abby was trying to keep Lev safe to the very end, and I think she also realized that Abby has suffered just as much, if not more, than she has. The final confrontation when Abby and Ellie fought in the water, again, I felt like Ellie didn't really want to kill Abby, and she was just still trying to hold on to that anger and revenge just a little bit longer, but at the very end she could not go through with it. I think at the end she realized that her and Abby were really not that much different, and that in the end killing Abby would not accomplish anything but further guilt and violence. But look, like I said, I am no writer and I am no critic. This is just my interpretation of the story and how I see it from my point of view, and I absolutely love the story in this game, and this is simply my opinion, and you do not have to agree if you don't want to. That is perfectly fine. But again, if you tuned in to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time. Later.